250 years ago, a group of men picked up a pen and changed the world forever. They weren't kings, they weren't conquerors, they were farmers, lawyers, merchants, and thinkers who looked at the most powerful empire on earth and said, "Enough. We are done. We are free, and we are willing to die for it." Think about that for a second. Every single man who signed that declaration knew what they were risking: their property, their families, their lives. Treason against the British Crown wasn't a debate, it was a death sentence. And they signed it anyway. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most extraordinary acts of courage in human history. And what did they build? Against every odd, against every prediction, against every empire that laughed at the idea that ordinary people could govern themselves. What they built has stood for 250 years. We've been through a civil war that nearly tore us in half, been through the Great Depression that broke the economy and tested the spirit of every American family. We stormed the beaches of Normandy. We put a man on the moon. We watched our own skyline burn on September 11th, and we got back up every single time. This country has been knocked down. We have gotten back up because that's who we are. America is not just a place on the map. It's not just a flag or an anthem. Though I love both, America is an idea. The most radical, most hopeful, most audacious idea in the history of human civilization, that every person deserves to be free, that you don't need a king, that the people can govern themselves, that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. People are still crossing oceans and deserts to get here. They're still risking everything for a shot at that idea. That tells you everything you need to know. So today, on this 250th birthday, I don't want to just talk about what's wrong. Which, yeah, we got problems. We argue. It may get ugly. But you know what? So does every family. And this is our family. Today I want to talk about what this country got right, what it has survived, what it has built, and why after 250 years, I'm still proud to be an American. America has always been a nation shaped by people who came from somewhere else. From the first European settlers, to the Irish fleeing famine, to the Italians, Germans, Poles, Jews, Chinese, Mexicans, Cubans, Vietnamese, Indians, Africans, and countless others who arrived looking for a better life. Immigration is woven into the American story. It built our railroads, filled our factories, it shaped our cities. It gave us workers, soldiers, inventors, farmers, business owners, and families who helped turn a young republic into the most powerful country on earth. But the story of immigration in America is not just a story of open doors. It is also a story of limits. Because every generation has had asked the same hard question: how many people can this country realistically absorb while still protecting the stability, identity, and well-being of the people already here? In the 1800s, most immigrants came from Europe. The country was expanding westward. There was land, labor demand, and a growing industrial economy. But even then, immigration created tension. Chinese immigrants helped build the railroads, yet were later excluded by law. Irish and Italian immigrants faced suspicion. Eastern Europeans were accused of being too different to assimilate. Then in the 1920s, America made a decision. Immigration was restricted. Quotas were created. The country slowed the flow of newcomers because leaders believed the nation needed time to absorb the massive waves that had already arrived. That pause changed America. It allowed millions of immigrant families to assimilate, learn English, build communities, and become part of the American mainstream. Then, in 1965, the system changed again. The old quota system was removed, and immigration opened to more of the world. Since then, Americans demographics have transformed dramatically. The country is no longer shaped mainly by immigration from Europe. Today, immigration comes largely from Latin America, Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. That change has made America more diverse than ever before. But diversity alone does not answer the real question. The real question is whether the United States, right now, has the capacity to keep increasing immigration, legal or illegal, while so many Americans are already struggling. Take a look around. We have veterans sleeping on sidewalks after serving the country. We have working families who can't even afford rent. We have citizens delaying medical care because the bill might bankrupt them. We have schools overcrowded, hospitals overwhelmed, roads crumbling, cities dealing with homelessness, and young people wondering if they will ever own a home. We have rural towns losing hospitals. We have major cities unable to house their own residents, wages that often fail to keep up with the cost of living. And yet, the political class keeps telling Americans that questioning immigrant levels is hateful, cruel, or anti-immigrant. But it is not hateful to ask whether a country should take care of its own people first. It is not cruel to say that compassion without capacity becomes chaos. And it is not anti-immigrant to believe that immigration should be controlled, measured, legal, and based on what the country can actually handle. A nation is not just a piece of land. A nation is a home. And no responsible family keeps inviting more people into the house before making sure the people already inside have food, shelter, safety, and stability. That does not mean immigrants are the enemy. They're not entirely. Many immigrants come here for the same reason generations before them came here. To work, to worship freely, to raise children, and to chase the American dream. But the American dream cannot survive if it becomes unavailable to the citizens already here. Before we expand immigration further, we should ask some basic questions. Have we secured the border? At times, yes. Have we taken care of our veterans? Have we rebuilt our infrastructure? Have we restored trust in the system? If the answer is no, then maybe the responsible position is not more immigration. Maybe the responsible position is a pause, a reset, a national breath, a chance to repair the country before adding more pressure to the systems that are already breaking. America can be generous, but generosity must be guided by responsibility. America can welcome newcomers, but welcome must be balanced with order. America can honor its immigrant past while still admitting that the needs of today are different from the needs of yesterday. The question is not whether immigration helped build America. It did. The question is whether unlimited or poorly managed immigration helps America now, at this moment, when so many of our citizens are falling behind. A strong country must have borders. A compassionate country must have priorities. And a wise country must understand that before it can be a refuge for the world, it must first be a home for its own people. There are moments in history when a nation must decide what it truly believes. For the United States, that moment came in the 19th century. The issue? Slavery. For nearly 250 years, millions of men, women, and children were bought and sold as property in what would become the United States. Families were separated. Freedom was denied. Human beings were reduced to commodities, fueling an agricultural economy that enriched many while inflicting unimaginable suffering on those who held in bondage. It was America's greatest contradiction. A nation founded on the words, all men are created equal, tolerated an institution built upon the denial of that very principle. The, the debate grew louder with every passing decade. Some argued slavery was necessary for the Southern economy. Others argued it was morally indefensible and fundamentally incompatible with the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. Eventually, compromise failed. In 1861, the nation went to war. The American Civil War became the bloodiest conflict in our nation's history. More than 600,000 Americans lost their lives. Brothers fought brothers. Families were divided. Entire cities and communities were left in ruins. But beneath the battles and politics was one defining question. Would America remain a nation where human beings could legally own other human beings? The answer came at an extraordinary cost. The Union was preserved. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery throughout the United States. Soon after came the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing equal protection under the law, and the 15th Amendment prohibiting racial discrimination and voting based on race. The road ahead was far from perfect. Reconstruction collapsed, segregation emerged, Jim Crow laws denied millions of Americans equal rights for generations. The civil rights movement would later challenge those injustices and bring about landmark legal changes. History did not end in 1865, but something fundamental had changed. The law no longer recognized one person as the property of another. That was a turning point, not just for America, but for the idea of the human liberty itself. Yet slavery did not disappear from the world. Today, according to the international organizations, tens of millions of people are still trapped in forms of modern slavery, forced labor, human trafficking, debt bondage, forced marriage, and the exploitation of children continues to exist across every continent. The chains look different. The suffering does not. The reality reminds us that the fight against slavery was never just an American story. It is a human story. America's history is complicated. It contains extraordinary achievements and profound failures. Recognizing slavery as one of those failures does not diminish the country. It demonstrates the importance of confronting difficult truths rather than ignoring them. The Civil War showed that some principles are worth defending, even at tremendous cost. It proved that a nation can acknowledge injustice, change its laws, and move closer to the ideals it claims to believe in. The lesson of the Civil War is not simply that slavery ended in America. The lesson is that freedom requires vigilance. The rights we celebrate today were not inevitable. They were earned through sacrifice, protected by law, and expanded by generations who believed the country could become more than just it had been before. History should not be remembered to assign guilt to those living today. It should be remembered so that we never repeat the mistakes of yesterday. Because the measure of a nation is not whether it has a perfect past. It is whether it has the courage to confront its past honestly, learn from it, and continue striving toward a more free and more just future. There are moments in history when a nation is not measured by its wealth, its technology, or the size of its cities. It is measured by the character of its people. The First World War was one of those moments when the world descended into unimaginable violence. Young Americans crossed an ocean into a conflict they had never seen with their own eyes. They left behind farms, factories, classrooms, and families. Many were barely old enough to vote, yet they still answered the call because they believed there were causes greater than themselves. They fought in the mud-filled trenches of Europe under relentless artillery fire and during conditions that are difficult to comprehend today. Thousands never came home. Only a generation later, the world faced an even greater darkness. The Second World War was more than a clash of armies. It became a battle over whether tyranny would dictate the future of civilization. As dictators expanded across continents and innocent people were persecuted and murdered, Americans once again stepped forward. From the beaches of Normandy to the forests of the Ardennes, from the skies over Europe to the islands of the Pacific, Americans fought in places whose names many had never heard before. They were asked to risk everything there. They stormed beaches under machine gun fire, knowing many would never reach the sand. They flew bombers through walls of anti-aircraft fire, fully aware that every mission could be their last. They sailed across oceans, hunted by submarines. They fought through jungles, mountains, frozen forests, and ruined cities. And countless never returned home. Behind every white cross in a military cemetery is a story that ended far too soon. A son who would never hug his mother, a husband who would never return to his wife, a father who would never meet the child waiting for him back home. They surrendered every tomorrow so that others could have one. But those who fought were not driven by conquest alone. Many believed they were defending the principles that define a free people: liberty over oppression, self-government over dictatorship, and the belief that every generation has a responsibility to leave the world better than it found it. American factories became the arsenal of democracy, producing ships, tanks, aircraft, trucks, and supplies at an unprecedented scale. Workers at home, women and men alike, labored around the clock to support those on the front lines. Farmers fed allies across the globe. Families rationed food, fuel, and materials because they understood that victory required sacrifice from an entire nation, not just those carrying rifles. Victory came at an extraordinary cost. Hundreds of thousands of Americans lost their lives across the two world wars. Millions more returned, carrying wounds that could be seen and many that could not. Their sacrifices echo through every generation that has followed. American excellence was never about claiming perfection. Our history, like that of every nation, includes triumphs and failures. But excellence is found in the willingness of ordinary people to rise above fear, to answer a call larger than themselves, and to accept extraordinary burdens in defense of what they believed was right. That legacy belongs not to politicians or generals alone, but to the infantrymen who climbed out of a trench, the medic who ran toward the wounded, the sailor who stayed at a station as his ship sank, the pilot who never returned from a mission, and the families who endured the unbearable silence of an empty chair at the dinner table. Freedom has never been free. It was purchased by generations willing to give everything for people they would never meet. If we are to honor them, we must do more than remember the dates or recite the battles. We must remember the courage, the humility, the unity, and the sacrifice that carried a nation through its darkest hours. Because American excellence is not simply found in victory, it is found in the men and women who, when history demanded everything, answered with everything they had. But History does not stop when guns fall silent. When World War II came to an end, the world entered a new era. Nations that had been consumed by conflict now faced a different challenge. Not how to win a war, but how to build a lasting peace and create a better future. For the United States, this marked the beginning of one of the most remarkable periods of innovation and growth in modern history. America had demonstrated its industrial strength during the war. Now, it would demonstrate what that strength could accomplish in times of peace. Across the country, factories that had once produced bombers and tanks began producing automobiles, household appliances, construction equipment, and consumer goods that transformed everyday life. Universities expanded scientific research. Laboratories pushed the boundaries of medicine, engineering, and technology. Entrepreneurs took risks on ideas that many believed would never succeed. America became a place where imagination was paired with opportunity. A place where inventors, scientists, mechanics, engineers, business owners, and workers from every background contributed to something larger than themselves. Innovation did not belong to one company. It did not belong to one inventor. And it certainly did not belong to one generation. It became part of the American story. The modern world was shaped by countless people from many nations, but the United States played a defining role in advancing and scaling technologies that changed how billions of people live. The airplane made the world smaller. Mass production made products more affordable and accessible. The transistor and microchip revolutionized computing. American universities and researchers helped pioneer breakthroughs in aerospace, medicine, communications, agriculture, and manufacturing. The development and expansion of the internet connected businesses, classrooms, hospitals, governments, and families across continents. Satellites made global communication and navigation possible. American astronauts became the first human beings to walk on the moon, proving that determination, engineering, and collaboration could accomplish what once seemed impossible. Doctors, researchers, and scientists developed new medicines and imaging technologies, surgical techniques, and treatments that have saved and improved millions of lives around the world. American agriculture produced innovations that help feed growing populations. American businesses built products used in homes, schools, hospitals, and workplaces across the globe. These achievements were never the work of a single individual. Behind every invention stood thousands of people: teachers who inspired curiosity, parents who encouraged ambition, engineers who solved impossible problems, factory workers who built with precision, scientists who spent years chasing answers, entrepreneurs willing to risk failure in pursuit of success, workers whose names will never appear in history books, yet whose contributions help shape the lives we now take for granted. Innovation has never been about seeking recognition. It has always been about believing that tomorrow can be better than today. That belief helped define the American experience. For generations, people from around the world came to the United States searching for opportunity, not because success was guaranteed, but because the possibility existed. They brought new ideas, different perspectives, unique talents, and an extraordinary willingness to work. Together with those already here, they helped build industries, communities, universities, and businesses that drove innovation forward. That constant exchange of ideas became one of America's greatest strengths. The story of American innovation is not simply about machines or technology. It is about human potential. It is about a nation that repeatedly challenged acceptable limits and asked difficult questions. How can we build it better? How can we make it faster? How can we improve lives? How can we solve problems that no one has solved before? These questions continue to shape our future. Today, the influence of those efforts surround us. The computer on a student's desk, the GPS guiding an ambulance, the aircraft connecting continents, medical devices, satellites, the technology that allows ideas to, to travel around the world in seconds. Many nations have contributed to the modern age, and innovation has always been a shared human endeavor. Yet the United States has played an outsized role in transforming research, invention, and entrepreneurship into technologies and industries that have had global reach. That legacy is something many Americans take pride in, not because America has been perfect, no nation is, but because generation after generation chose to build, to discover, to improve, and it pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. To be proud of America is not simply to celebrate its victories, it is to recognize the countless men and women whose curiosity, determination, and hard work helped shape the world we live in today. Their legacy reminds us that the strength of a nation is measured not only by the battles it wins, but by the ideas it creates, the opportunities it provides, and the future it inspires. That, too, is American excellence. Every generation inherits a story, not one written by politicians or preserved only in museums, but one written by ordinary men and women who faced extraordinary moments. It is a story of sacrifice and service, of innovation and perseverance, of triumphs worth celebrating and hardships worth remembering. The pages of American history remind us that no generation has been without its challenges, and no generation has been without people willing to rise to meet them. While our past is complex, it is also filled with individuals whose actions helped shape the nation we now know today, and whose legacy continues to influence our future. I'd love to hear from you guys. In the comments below, tell me which moment in American history makes you the most proud, and how you feel about the future of this great country. Thoughtful discussion is one of the best ways we can continue learning from one another and from our shared history. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you never miss a future episode. At the end of this, I'm going to add a small slideshow featuring original newspaper articles that my grandma and great grandma have stored for over the past 80 years. 80 years. These authentic headlines and reports offer a unique window into history, allowing us to see these defining moments through the eyes of the people who live them. It's the closest thing we will ever get to time travel, especially in my lifetime, and probably yours. Thank you for joining me on this special episode on America's 250th birthday. Until next time, stay curious.